All right, welcome back, everybody. It is the Awesemo.com NHL DFS strategy show. I'm Jake Hari, joined by a familiar face if you've been watching some Awesemo shows for the last couple of years. Maybe not so much familiar for NHL, making his Awesemo NHL debut, TMcB, Terry McBride, my co-host for a bunch of MLB shows that we did. Now taking it over to a similar DFS sport in NHL. How you doing, Terry?
Doing good, bud. I'm happy to be here. Excited to be jumping into some NHL. Been a lifelong hockey fan. Played some NHL DFS over time, but like I told you, I'm doing a little catch up on some context on things. So hopefully everybody's a little patient with me out there. But bringing my DFS knowledge and all the stats and everything to the table. So I'm looking forward to getting into this with you, and I think it's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it'll translate over well for other sports. Maybe not so much NFL. I know you play NFL and you play a lot of MLB, and I know you play MLB really well. So I think a lot of the just DFS concepts translate sport to sport. And I think MLB and NHL are probably the best two if you're starting playing one or the other and transitioning to a different sport. So a lot of the stacking rules, how's it been going for you the first couple slates here? Have you been playing every day so far?
I haven't gotten in every day. Just I've been tied up with basketball. I was on some shows and doing some articles and a little bit of personal life stuff. But I threw 150 into the first couple days. Did like a break-even-ish, maybe down like 10% night the first night. Got my clock clean the second night, I think. That might have been reversed. But it's a bit of a bumpy start, but having a lot of fun putting it together.
Yeah, it's been a fun season so far. I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, how's your season started out? Just as far as like your results, I know we've had some winners at the site and all, but how you doing?
I don't know. It hasn't been great for me. It's been okay. I think I'm probably down like 10% of my entry fees so far. I think I've had like maybe one profitable night out of 6, but like the losing nights. I forget, playing all these NFL showdowns and stuff like that. Like, you don't have to lose 80% every single time you lose. You can lose 20% in a night. And so I've been doing a lot of that. Been close a couple times. Yeah. Was pretty close the first night. Got knocked out towards the end of the late games. And last couple nights just been kind of hanging around, cashing a bunch of lineups, but not really getting any big cashes. So it's been okay. Feel pretty good about my game. Definitely still a little rusty. There's some things where I'm going through FC and just like going through all the games and being like, oh, did I do this last year? Like, let me play around with this and let me add this rule here. And how did I do this crunch? What order did I do this? And so there's definitely some of that. But yeah, it's been okay. It's been okay. Just looking for that one big cash to kind of get the season kicked off right. And we're only a week in, but it's been a lot of fun. So last night,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you hit it on the head with, just getting into the nature of the tournaments and like the cash outs and everything, just being able to play a sport where, you might be losing, but you're only losing 10, 20%. You're getting a lot of entries over the cash line is refreshing compared to I took a bath on showdowns this year too. So in football. So I feel you on that. It's definitely been fun from that regard.
Yeah, been a lot of fun. So we had a subscriber win the 20K last night over on DK. So that was pretty cool. He shouted out the Awesemo NHL channel. His username is, actually, I don't know which 20K this was. Let's see. It was the $10. Okay, so I am on the right one. So just going through his lineup, he had Henrique one-off, got 0 points. You don't often see zeros in NHL. I mean, it happens every once in a while, but in a large field tournament, you usually need to get something out of everyone. But he just basically hit the complete nuts with the rest of his lineup. Bo Horvat, 32. JT Miller, 22.5. Quinn Hughes, 14.5. So a little Vancouver PP stack. And then a Vegas PP stack with Tuck, Pietrangelo, and Mark Stone. All those guys had around 20 or over. Binnington in net was solid 25. And the Tyler Toffoli one-off. So more of a cashy build, I would say, but took it down in the large field tournament. And I believe this was his only lineup in this tournament. Yeah. So, this is the other guy. I think he had four lineups in the tournament. So not too bad there. Not every day that you can have a subscriber take it down. But we've had a couple so far. Eric, NBA guy, took it down on the first night over on FanDuel. Now we've had a DK winner. So maybe we'll see me or you up there tonight, Terry. We'll see.
That'd be a pretty solid way to start my show career off here on the NHL side of things. I'll take you up on that. Sounds good.
All right. Last night, Toronto, they completely busted. So if you played last night, I don't know if you did, Terry, but if you played Toronto or Edmonton to some extent, like their top guys got there somewhat, but you were pretty much dead if you went. Like a lot of lineups were dead before the first game even got over. So if you went heavy on them, probably didn't have a good night. If you didn't, you probably did okay at the very least. Maybe you didn't just get destroyed or anything like that. Let's start with the games here. We've got 6 of them on the slate. We'll get out of here in about 50 minutes or so. We've got Philadelphia and Boston, 2.5 implied total going on Awesemo's totals on the lineup builder. If you guys want to check those out, it's just nhl.lineups.awesemo.com. Or if you have a premium sub on the site for NHL or Platinum, you can get your own personalized Awesemo NHL lineup builder that has the projections, the ownership projections, and then the stack projections, which is pretty cool. So for all the forwards, you get added up all their line mates, and they get a stack projection. So pretty cool stuff to go along with the top stacks, ownership projections, all that stuff that you guys know. We got Carter Hart in net and Tuukka Rask for the Bruins. Not too much in terms of news here, but a couple of smaller things. For Philadelphia, Philippe Myers is out for at least the next little bit. He's going to be replaced by Mark Friedman, not really a relevant player. And then Morgan Frost is also out for the Flyers. Bruins, no David Pastrnak still. Jake DeBrusk is going to slide up to the top line with Bergeron and Marchand. Second line, Krejci, Nick Ritchie, and Jack Studnicka. Third line with Coyle centering. Those guys, I don't think people are going to be on that too much, but not a ton of ownership in this game. Terry, since you haven't played a bunch of NHL DFS, Boston 1 basically gets ownership no matter what happens. They're missing their top scorer, David Pastrnak, their best goal scorer, but they're still really good even without him on the line. So they're getting reasonable ownership. What say you on Boston 1 right now on a pretty short slate?
Yeah, I mean, look, I know at least that much that like Boston 1, pretty good, pretty popular line. So I was obviously, I was eyeing them up, taking a look at the top stacks tool that you mentioned, and they're one of the top stacks listed on the entire thing, 18.4% probability of being the top 2 stack. And what I really like to look at on that tool is the leverage column. So we know they're one of the higher priced overall stacks, but they're not getting owned quite enough as compared to what their probability of being one of the top options is. So despite the popularity, they actually look pretty okay from a leverage point of view. So if you can pay up and get to them, they are taking a look on this is DK. They're the 3rd most expensive line stack, but they've got a pretty strong leverage score. Not as strong as the top 2, but they're less expensive than the top 2. So just taking a look at it from that perspective, I can still probably justify getting to some Boston. You're saving a little bit of money over going to like Colorado or Tampa's top lines. So I think we can justify getting to it there. If we see the popularity spike, it might make sense to start looking around to different spots. But that would be to me, to my untrained eye, that would be the core spot of where we want to get to in this game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not seeing a ton of other relevant lines. I mean, Frost being out on the Flyers doesn't really do a ton for me. Boston, I mean, you can tell by this implied total. Or if you've been watching hockey or playing NHL DFS, any of you guys, they're a pretty good defensive team. Pastrnak being out doesn't really change that at all. They're pretty solid 1 through 4. They're top, like all their forward lines are solid defensively. Some of them more low event than others, like the second line with Krejci, usually a pretty slow pace. But yeah, I'm not really looking to play a ton of Flyers here. The line that might come up in popularity as we get closer to lock would be the Hayes, Giroux, and Farabee line, just because right now they're showing no ownership. They're pretty cheap. They've all got power play time in some fashion. But I can't get myself to really like too many flyers here. I'm not coming up with really anything outside of just some flyers to mix in. I mean, flyer stacks, not the Philadelphia Flyers, but it is the Philadelphia Flyers. But just like some stacks here and there of like this second line, Patrick Lindblom, Konechny, because you can fit them with someone like a Colorado one or one of these more, like if you like Tampa tonight or someone like that, Winnipeg, one of these more expensive lines, they go okay with them at basically no ownership. But Boston one, I'm probably going to end up.
From them too.
Say that again.
I was saying you've seen some early production a little bit from that Philly 2 line as well. So if you're going to that team, that kind of makes some sense. And like you said with the Hayes Giroux line, just being the top line and somewhat productive as well so far, it makes sense that people would go to them if they see that really low ownership total. But I think part of the key that you mentioned, you're talking about Corsi for percentage so far this year for Philly of 44.25 and a 91.3 team save percentage on the Boston side of things with a 55.56 Corsi for percentage. So the puck possession, the all the advanced analytics probably pointing more toward the Boston side of things for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one's probably my least favorite game. I don't have anything on the blue line that I'm looking for. Really, I mean, maybe you want to go with like a Matt Grzelcyk, or if you want to play McAvoy, but he's 5,200. I guess he's going to see a bunch of time with Boston one. He almost always does when they're on home ice. And again, not much on the Flyer side. Maybe an Eric Gustafsson one-off at 2,700. We're still having issues with him in FC, by the way, if anybody hasn't checked. We had the wrong Eric Gustafsson price. So he's actually not 2,700. He's actually 4,500 when I just did a quick refresh there. Actually, that's his FanDuel price. He is 4,700. So there we go. I'm all over.
There we go.
Yeah.
And not very much ownership at all. So he makes some sense as like somebody to peek at. And then you mentioned oh boy, this is my first mispronounced name, I'm sure. Grzelcyk from the Bruins blue line on the power. Grzelcyk on the power play one for the Bruins. Just the ownership on him looks reasonable if you go to those power play line stacks with the Bruins, or if you're just looking for a reasonably priced one-off on the blue line. You get only 3% ownership on FanDuel, 2% on DK at not a backbreaking price on him. So possibly a mix and match defenseman.
Yeah, I mean, good on the pronunciation. I think that's a fine call. Top power play duties for him. Seth in chat, Seth Hater, Seth. I don't know, whatever 4 digits are after his name in Slack. Our favorite troll, he really likes Grzelcyk, he calls him. He's his favorite player for some reason. And Seth binked on FanDuel and Yahoo apparently last night, probably some single entry or something like that. So congrats to Seth. Loves playing on the smaller sites, taking other people's money.
Congrats to him. Dude's around all the time. I'll take Grzelcyk. That's a cool nickname. Kind of reminds me of the old Transformer Grimlock, the Tyrannosaurus Rex guy. Were you Transformers as a kid, or was that way before your time?
Maybe other kids my age. I don't know. I don't watch a ton of movies. I was always just into sports. Like I would just watch the Cubs religiously, and that was about it.
Right on. Can't have any notes with that.
Yeah, let's go to the Devils and the Islanders. Another low total here for the road team. Devils 2.4 implied goals. Just 3 for the Islanders, maybe a touch over. Mackenzie Blackwood and Semyon Varlamov are your expected goalies here. Nice part about this game, we don't have goalie confirmation, is that we're going to know 20, 30 minutes before lock who actually goes based on who leads the team out on the ice. Islanders, not as popular as I thought. One note here, we have Justin Bailey in the projections just because I haven't seen anything on Islanders lines. So I'm guessing we're just going to have to pull him out, put in some scrub on this second line. And that's how I'm probably going to crunch my lineups because Bailey is on the COVID list. So get him out of your lineups if you have lineups built from earlier today. Islanders top line, pretty affordable. The one thing about them is that they don't play a ton of minutes, so that's the frustrating part. But when they do play, they generate as many chances as some of your top lines in all of the NHL. Full power play correlation for them. What do you think about this Islanders top line?
Yeah, I really like off the top the power play correlation there. There's some quality skill players. Off to a little bit, I guess, of a slow start, just looking at some of the numbers. And overall, Team Corsi 4%, 42.45 is definitely down a bit from where you'd expect. But they were slow last year too, 46.45. So just not that kind of big time puck possession team. But they get decent amount of shots off. So I definitely think we can go to that line. Just taking a look over on I'm on FanDuel here. They look pretty well. They're around level ownership. It's trickling a little toward the over-owned, but they're not like a huge percentage of being the top stack. They're not a huge amount of ownership on FanDuel. So they're kind of in that in the mix kind of a range for me, I guess. And then flipping over to DK, similar kind of a story on DK. It looks like right around the same ownership and probability of being in the top stack. So I can definitely work with either one of those top two lines, I think, from the Islanders with some mixing and matching. Obviously, losing Bailey off of the second line there with coming out of the power play as well on that stack hurts a little bit. But like you said, we can hopefully find out in advance who's going to be in that spot and pop that guy in FC and let it fly.
Yeah. Some people were speculating it might be Kiefer Bellows, who's listed on the third line right now. I mean, the second line isn't really a line I'm targeting all that much. I think they're probably going to face up against the Hughes-Palmieri line for the Devils, which I think is going to be pretty solid. And then Barzal, Lee, and Eberle get to go up against the Devils' depth, which I'm very excited about. So I was hoping the ownership wasn't too high. It's not high enough for me on Islanders 1. Top stack tool doesn't hate the Islanders on either site, which is also something I was looking forward to seeing. I think they're one of the better lines in hockey and one of the better lines for DFS because when they're priced up like this, they're not going to grade out as perfect values for people, and that's going to keep the ownership intact because they don't play like the Colorado 1 minutes. They don't play 20 minutes a game. They might play 16, 17, but I think their upside is 90% of some of these other really, really good lines in the NHL. And if they can hit the 80, 90 percentile outcome here, and I think they have a really good chance to do it, 14% is a little bit too low for me. So right now they're my highest exposed on the night. I'm rolling with Islanders 1. Do you like anything on the New Jersey side here?
I mean, let's be clear, using the word like, you see the shirt I'm wearing, I don't like either of these teams or anything on them. But I think, you mentioned the Hughes line. They got the power play correlation as well there. So I think they're probably in play. They dominated my poor Rangers the other night, and Hughes had a very big night. I like the leverage you're getting on them on DK. They're not a huge team to only a 5-ish% probability of being the top stack, but not getting much ownership at all. So those are the kind of teams that, lines or stacks that I like to focus in on, regardless of the sport, really. Is where we're getting a team that has capability, is getting a significant amount of time, if we're talking about hockey minutes, basketball minutes, whatever. So guys who I know are going to be on the ice with skill at a reasonable price that aren't getting quite the ownership, even if they don't pop to that 15% level that the Islanders Eberle Lee line does as far as probability of being a top line. For GPP play, I'm okay with something like that, where I'm taking a team that's a little bit less likely but getting significantly less owned at semi, evenish kind of a skill. So I'm into that line a little bit. I like the power play correlation there. The rest of them don't really look to be, jumping off the page at me.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with some Devils 1. A little worried about Nelson Beauvillier. I don't remember off the top of my head how Bailey affects that line from a Corsi perspective, but I'll go in and check on that. Their Devils 1 is expected to get the lion's share if the Devils score 3 goals here. But I also like the third line, Zaka, Andreas Janssen, and Nikita Gusev. They're the second or third, depending on the site. I hope most sites list them as the third, because then most people won't play them. They just like to stick to the top 6. But there's definitely some spots where you can play third lines tonight, getting essentially no ownership. I just think, I know Cliffy was not raving about this line, but he was pretty interested, and Cliffy is a very good hockey mind, and he liked the way that they were set up. They're all in the second power play unit. Not as big of a deal as the top power play, but a reasonable price on this Devils third line, and probably won't have to face too much against the Islanders' top two. So that's probably the stack I prefer. What about defensemen in this game? Pulock, wow, almost 20% ownership. All right, then. I guess he goes with the Islanders one. I did not expect him to see that to see him that high on our ownership projections. But anyone jumping out to you?
Yeah, I mean, that one obviously leaped off the page when I saw the ownership numbers. He's a guy I look for, and just my limited DFS knowledge and on the hockey side of things, I know he's fairly good scoring defenseman. Just taking a look, he averaged last year 22-40 ice time, 35 points, 139 block shots, so 8 power play points. So like to go to him, but definitely a lot of ownership on him. So I mean, there are probably options to go to a different spot. You're talking about 20% ownership on both sites. Maybe if we look to the other side, we'll do a PK Subban, cheaper, less ownership on him. Also a skilled offensive guy, also getting time on the first power play unit last year, 22:07 average ice time, 18 points, 90 block shots, 6 power play points. So he's a productive guy, and I think fewer people are going to be on him. Depends, of course, where we're stacking. If you're building with a ton of Islanders, or if you're playing the Islanders goaltender, you obviously don't necessarily want to go to Subban, but I think he might make some sense. Those were the guys that really kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, and Subban, I like the call there. As a one-off guy, or in addition with your Devils one stack, he's played 30, 26, and almost 24 minutes his first 3 games. So can't just, pencil him in for 28 or something, but I think he's going to be around 25 a lot of the games with this defensive core that they have. So I like the call there at about half the ownership, especially as a one-off guy. Let's move it on to Tampa and Columbus, and then we'll talk a little bit of MMA promos coming up here. Big fight on Saturday. I don't know if you're aware, Terry, but a little tease there. 3 implied total for the Lightning, 2.6 for the Blue Jackets. Andrei Vasilevsky expected to go for the Lightning. Joonas Korpisalo for the Blue Jackets. That is confirmed. Haven't seen a ton of talk about Tampa. Columbus, I'm sure you know, Terry, pretty good defensive team, and that's reflected in the implied total here for the Lightning. That's one of the lower totals they're probably going to have all season. Even though it is a road game, just over 3 goals right now. Columbus they've had their number for the last couple of years, if that matters to you in the playoffs, giving them a really big fight. But yeah, good defensive team here for the Blue Jackets. I don't know. Are you going to bet on Tampa and this top line of points, Stamkos and Palat, to overcome this solid Blue Jackets D at low ownership?
Yeah, I think the last thing you said there is probably the key, right? It's the ownership. We're paying up for them for sure, but we know the skill set on that line. We know, even the layman knows that those are guys you want to go to. That's a stack we want to go to. And we're seeing them with a massive leverage share, only drawing about 4% ownership on DK. On FanDuel, they're a little bit more popular. It's come up, but it's still a 6.8 leverage score, under 10% ownership as a line. They're very expensive. You're going to have to get creative with how to build in some other stuff with these guys, and which goaltender you're going with is probably going to be a big part of that. But I definitely think there's value in going to that play today. Out of the lines in this game, they make the most sense to me. I think when we see that much skill, yeah, it's a great defensive unit, but for that kind of production on that kind of a line at that significant an ownership gap, I think it makes sense to go to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not usually I don't know if I'd call myself a Tampa one hater, but I feel like I'm never as high on them as the public is. So there's a few teams like that, but definitely Tampa has crushed me these last few years because I always think they're a little bit too highly owned. I try to get cute with some of these other top lines that just aren't as good, frankly. But if this ownership sticks, even if they're under, so right now we've got them at under 5%. If they're under 10, I think on pretty much any 6-game slate, they've got to be an option that makes you raise your eyebrows a little bit. They don't have Nikita Kucherov, but Stamkos has started off the season pretty well. Point, a very good center for maybe not for DFS as a one-off, but more as a guy, a compliment to Stamkos that can get you the 3-point bonus if they have a big game. And then Palat plays in the top power play. He's probably a little bit overpriced, but he usually gets left off the stack if people are just doing a 2-man point Stamkos. So you could potentially get some leverage even within your Tampa 1 stack. So, I mean, I like it. And it's basically just an ownership thing. Not a ton of great things to say about the matchup. Columbus switches up their lines as much as any team. They've already done it, I think, almost every game that they've played so far this season. So today, at least to start with, basically the only line that we have clarity on is this third line, Tessier, Bjorkstrand, and Liam Foudy. John Tortorella, head coach, said that those three were probably going to start out together. And I haven't seen any other information on other lines. So we're just kind of guessing it's Domi, Jenner, and Foligno, Dubois, Bjorkstrand, and Grigorenko as this top line. I would think the Dubois line goes up against Point, but I'm not exactly sure how they're going to treat this. Columbus doesn't really hard match. At least they didn't hard match very much last season. But maybe we could see that with the Dubois line here. Other note is that Blake Coleman was taken off the COVID list, so I think he's available to play tonight. I don't know for sure if he's going to be in. Like we've seen with NFL and NBA, like these guys get off the list, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to play that night, depending on how they're feeling after. You guys know the deal, but just be aware that Coleman could be in. Right now we've got him in. I haven't seen anything confirmed on him. One of the lower projections that Victor Hedman's going to have all season, 8.26 right now. That might be a minutes issue, so I'm going to go check into that after the show. Maybe he's not getting as many minutes as he should be. Does anything else stick out to you in this game? Any of these Columbus lines looking good in the top stack tool, or do you like anything else?
I will say the Dubois line for Columbus looks really overowned. They're very inexpensive if that's the way it comes together, at like 11-1 on DK. But it looks like they're more than double up on their ownership shares compared to their probability of being one of the top stacks. So I would definitely consider maybe not going to that one if you're looking to play some Columbus. And really, they don't jump out too much on DK. Over on FanDuel, they're drawing less ownership. It's more like level around where they are with their probability of being in the top two because they're more expensive. They jump up to like the 16K range, so they're in like that mid-tier on FanDuel. So they seem like a reasonable spot to just kind of not consider for a line that isn't incredibly popular, but it's definitely one that people are rostering and putting into the mix. There's definitely value there, which is probably what's driving a lot of that through optimizers and whatnot. But something to consider there, in a spot where they're not the most productive offensive team, not the most productive offensive line, just looking at some of these numbers. So I think you can maybe jump away from that if you had to. Yeah,
I like the call. I mean, I don't know what to think of these lines. I'd probably take a stab at the second and third lines for Columbus and MME. And right now I'm getting to almost no Columbus 1. I don't think I'll have 0, but I think it's going to be like less than 5% of my lineups will have Columbus 1. And it looks like the field's going to have closer to, let's see what we're at. Yeah, wow. They're closer to 15% in our ownership projections right now. That seems way too high for me. Even if they come down to like 10, 12, I think that's probably what I'm.
Yeah, and as a team, I mean, just looking at some of the numbers I have, their Corsi for percentage, 48.55, only 6 high danger chances a game, finishing on 50% of those. So they're not like a really incredible dynamic offense. Yeah, you're talking about the top line, but do we want to grab the top line of kind of a meh offense as our primary stack at bad ownership? Doesn't make sense.
All right. One other note: Seth Jones, a little bit too cheap, and Werenski. I like taking stabs at those guys as one-offs. I think both those guys have a ton of upside, even in a bad matchup. Like they could potentially be on a winning lineup if Columbus scores like 2 goals here. Both candidates for the combo meal, the block shot bonus, and the 5-shot bonus. So I really like both of those guys, but they're getting owned a little bit as well. So I don't think I'm saying anything outlandish there. Are you taking any stabs at Corpus Sal at 7,200? Might see a decent amount of volume.
Yeah, I mean, it probably would make some sense as far as the goaltending goes. And you mentioned it's a good defense so far this year. He's at a 94% save percentage over 2 starts. It was 91.1% last year over 35 starts. So good defense in front of him. I think that makes some sense. I do like the notion of stacking goaltenders with a good offensive unit, and we're not probably going to be able to do that with what we're talking about just in some of the other things as far as this team goes. But I think he's in play just based on the volume of shots he's probably going to see. 4 or 5 of them get past him. That would be the risk.
Right. And I mean, you just kind of have to take that risk, I think, when you're playing on DK, especially on FanDuel, probably a little bit worse of a play. But as a one-off goaltender, 7,200, a guy that's probably going to see 30 shots, maybe 35. It's a great team in Tampa, but you see weird things happen all the time in one-game samples. And Carter Hutton, it was Brian Elliott shut out the other night. Like, that guy's a career backup. And he had like a 40 save shutout the other night. So weird stuff happens in hockey. Got to embrace that variance. All right. Terry, are you an MMA guy? I don't think I've ever asked you about that.
I'm not really a big MMA guy. I'm more of a boxing traditionalist kind of a guy when it comes to combat sports. So, but I enjoy the DFS aspect, and I enjoy our shows and our content.
Yeah, we've got very good shows. We've got very good articles. So check out all of those. They're free. YouTube, we've got a bunch of free articles on the site. And then if you want to kind of take it to another level, it is UFC 257. Poirier McGregor is the main event, as you guys all know, unless you've been living under a rock. That's the promo code is Connor. That is Connor with one N, CONOR. You get a MMA weekly pass for just $2.57. See what we did there? UFC 257, $2.57. Yeah, that's about $7 off the weekly pass price for MMA. Think you're gonna like it. Probably stick around and hang with us for another few weeks, because there's basically fights all the time in MMA. They really never stopped when COVID happened. I think for a couple weeks there, but we've also got great tools. If you like the Top Stacks tool, we've got a similar tool, or the Boom Bust for NBA. We've got a Top Fighters tool, UFC Pro Plays from our MMA team, and a bunch of other stuff for less than a cup of coffee. How about that? This offer is valid through Fight Night 1/23. That is January 23rd. That is in 2 days. So you've got 2 more days to mull this over, but I think you should get in now and hit us up in Slack. And if you've got that pass, you also can join the NHL Slack. So if you're not an NHL member, get the MMA membership, take advantage, and come in Slack for a week. You'll get purged at some point if you don't renew, but for now, you get to talk to us. All right, what do we got here left? 22 minutes. Perfect. Jets and the Ottawa Senators, Connor Hellebuck and Matt Murray are your expected goaltenders. 3.1 implied total for the Jets, 3 for the Sens. All right. Winnipeg changed up their lines a little bit. They've done some juggling throughout this beginning of the season. Nicola Ehlers is going to play on the second line, at least to start with, we think. And then Kyle Connor is going to jump back up to a familiar spot with Scheifele and Blake Wheeler. Those guys are fully correlated on the top power play. Ottawa, not a great defensive team. I don't know if they're going to be miserable this season, but they were for the last couple, and a team that we've always really targeted against. Winnipeg, not stout defensively either, though. So that's why you're seeing the 3 total for the Sens. They're very cheap once again. Kind of too cheap, I think. I really wanted to play this top line for Ottawa, but they're so valuable in terms of projection that you're just going to be duped, I think, if you play a ton of lineups like cookie cutter 3-3 or 4-3-1. So got to be aware of what you're doing if you're hammering Ottawa 1. I'm probably going to get into the double digits on them in terms of stacks, but I don't know. Where are you at on this game? We've got a couple stacks that have high probability, but also high ownership shares.
Yeah, both top lines, like you were just focusing on there, obviously, very popular, very much in play. That Ottawa one was coming up for me when I was running some dummy crunches and just taking a look at everything. There's tremendous value. You mentioned FanDuel, the line salary combined 13.8, 13.9 over on DK, but they're getting overowned. So you're going to need them to really hit production. It's most likely something that we could consider like good chalk, just given the superior value there and their probability of being in the top stack. They're a reasonably productive line. I like Kachuk as a power forward type of guy. So I think we can go to stacks of that and probably build it in. But then we're going to be talking about, let's look for different top lines as our expensive line that we're building with. Let's look at different ways to spend that savings that we're getting out of that line. So it makes sense, but be creative with what else you do with that lineup, because -8 leverage on DK and -10 on FanDuel. So people are going to be all over that line. They're basically doubled up on FanDuel in terms of the probability. The top line on the other side, I think, is probably one that it would make sense if you wanted to get above the field on a pay-up line, on a big line, even though they're very popular. If that was a line that came up, if they're 24, if that was a line that came up, in the 30s to approaching 40%, it wouldn't be tragic. I think there's enough talent and enough potential production there that you can get away with it. On DK, they're slightly positive leverage still, but again, they're going to be super popular. So if you build with them, you have to figure out different ways to go in most of your other spots. So it really comes down to a construction question and how creative you get.
Yeah, and Winnipeg 1's been a line that we've gone to for a while now. I mean, especially with this iteration, Scheifele, Connor, and Wheeler, they don't have like elite 5-on-5 numbers, but good enough. And the power play, like they're efficient with their chances. They get top power play. You could stack them up with Josh Morrissey. They've also got a new guy. I'm trying to think. Heinola. He's not new, but he did play some last year. But he's going to skate with Josh Morrissey. Sami Niku is not expected to play here. So I believe Heinola is like 2,500, or he's below 3K. I can't remember if he's mint salary, but that's probably going to be a guy. Okay, he's 2,500. Yeah, that's really nice. We've got a favorable projection for him, I think, around 6 points. So that's a guy you can punt with, or maybe a guy you want to get different with instead of Morrissey. Leave some salary on the table, go down to the youngster Heinola. On the Senators side, I'd like to see Shabbat shoot a lot more. If he's going to be 6,300, it is a good spot. And he correlates really well to the top line. So I'll have some of Shabbat, but I think I'm going to limit the one-offs with him. He just hasn't really been doing enough damage on his own for me to want to play him a lot as a one-off. Winnipeg, I don't know, you guys probably get tired of me saying it, but I try not to just go out of my way to fade lines. It's just the way I play NHL, and it's worked out okay for me. But I'm probably just going to close my eyes and limit them to 10% or 12% and go elsewhere. But I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with Winnipeg 1, but I think that's where I'm at right now. I'll let people know in Slack once the final crunches are coming through. But yeah. They just kind of tilt me. They are expensive. You can get Tampa 1 for basically it's going to be half or a quarter of the ownership or something like that. I don't know, in good conscience, if I can, not go to more Tampa 1 or some of these other great lines.
Yeah, and there are, a few others to choose from that do look as good, similar kind of a price tier with less ownership like you're getting at. And you've also got the factor of it being an event-based sport. So, yeah, when there's a super popular line, a super popular, part of a batting order, if we're talking baseball, in an event-based sport, it's not about only getting the time on the ice, time on the court like it is, time on the court in basketball, where, yeah, guys, chalky, I can leverage up on a guy and own him 95% because those numbers say that he's going to produce a certain point score that's going to be mandatory for me. That doesn't necessarily correlate and doesn't necessarily apply across the sports. So it makes a lot of sense to, look at that as kind of a decision point. I'm going to be over or under on this and kind of go from there. So it's interesting that you would choose to go under on that one. But it makes I
don't know. I'm kind of wishy-washy on them. I can just see them ending my night 15 minutes into the slate, even strength goal, power play goal, and you're just sweating them all getting the 3-point bonus, which they were, they've got a ton of upside. So I understand it. But I think maybe there's a case there is a case that Colorado 1 is going to come in a little bit under owned because of the other value elsewhere. And then this next game, this Montreal-Vancouver game, I really like. It was just 6-5 last night, but that's not the only reason. But There's potentially two guys out for Vancouver that are very important to their defense core. So we'll get to that in just a second. Before we move on, if everybody could drop a like for us, that really helps us out, helps us grow the channel. You guys know how that works, helps us show up for more people, and then we can pay more people and offer more free content, pay our producers, and have them not work crazy hours because they're working really hard to put this on for you guys. So we really appreciate the likes, and then more importantly, subscribe to the channel so you know when we go live. That helps us out even more. We're trying to hit 50K. Let's see what we're at. 48.9 right now. We can do it. We've got a couple more weeks. Super Bowl. 1,000 subscribers. I think we can do that. So yeah, hit the subscribe button. Help us out, and we'll keep offering hopefully good stuff. Montreal, Vancouver, 3.3 implied total for Montreal, 3.1 for the Canucks. Jake Allen and Thatcher Demko. That's who I have in right now. It was Price and Holtby last night, usually back-to-back. They don't play goalies 2 nights in a row, especially after a 6-5 game. But, if they do, we'll let you know in the Slack channel. So Allen is 7,700. Demko is 7,200. This game was 6-5 just last night. And two huge question marks for Vancouver. Alex Edler, one of the better defensive defensemen, guy who blocks a ton of shots. He's just massive for the Canucks, who already aren't that great of a defensive team. And then Travis Hamonic, guy that they got to sturdy up their defense core in the offseason. He's questionable as well. So I don't know if these guys are officially game time decisions. I just kind of learned of this before we got on, but this is probably why Montreal is favored, because of the unknowns on these guys. And then you've got Montreal 1, who's got some of the best numbers at 5-on-5. You guys hear me talk about them. Probably tired of me talking about them, but they're just really good, and they generate a ton of chances at 5-on-5. The power play correlation stinks for them, but they've gotten there before. Brendan Gallagher drives the play very, very well. I think he had 11 shot attempts in like 15 minutes last night. It was like 10 or 11. Anyways, he's awesome. 5,500. That is definitely a cash viable guy. What are you seeing here, Terry? Biggest total on the slate, and the ownership is not really as high as I thought it would be.
Yeah, that's what jumps out. I was just looking at some of the individual ownership on the top line for Montreal as you were talking about them, and most of those guys under 10%, and then going down obviously from there across the other lines. There's not much popularity on Montreal at all. And then on the other side of things, it's under 7% across the board, including the top line. So I definitely think there's something to be said about looking to this game as far as a way to get different. Just jumping over to the top stacks here. Looks like top stacks is kind of in agreement with that. There's not a ton of leverage. Like you're not going to be sneaking up on people, I guess, by doing it, but there's value here. They're not overpriced. They're reasonable probability of, there's 1, 2, 3 lines at least that are around the same amount of probability as some of the other bigger lines that we've talked about through the day. And they're only, 12% owned, 8% owned as a line. So there's easy ways to kind of mix and match your way through that and get different with, use these guys to help you get different with some of those more popular teams that we talked about. I think they make a ton of sense, the top 2 lines, and then looks like Vancouver too.
Yeah. So I it's like 5 lines in this game. Montreal 1 through 3. And this is considering the ownership. So it's not like I'm just jamming in, like mixing and matching a line from this game in every one of my 150 or anything. But I think I'm going to have a ton of exposure to this game. I like the third line for Montreal. Like you guys know my thoughts on Montreal 1, especially if 2 of their better defensemen are out for Vancouver. Even if they're not, you could still play them. The second line, Suzuki, Anderson, Drouin. I wish Drouin wasn't there. They're 15K, but they're getting basically no ownership. The third line's actually getting more ownership, probably because of that Toffoli huge performance last night. I like the Vancouver power play stack with Quinn Hughes 5,300. Hughes isn't a guy that I usually play as a one-off. I think I'd rather play like a Nate Schmidt or Tyler Myers as a one-off. Myers probably in for a bigger workload. Josh says Tyler Goat. I'm assuming he's talking about Tyler Myers playing a bunch of minutes without Edler and Hamonic. So Myers, Schmidt, probably the guy that benefit. Just going to get a bunch of minutes. So boost them up a little bit if you don't think they're high enough. But yeah, this game, just all around, I just absolutely love this game. What do you think of game stacking in NHL? Have you been experimenting with that at all, Terry?
So it's something that just from a DFS perspective, I usually don't consider. I usually take the approach of, one side or the other is going to, level up. Even when Vegas is kind of telling me that it's going to be a close game, I usually try and get value from one team and then go somewhere else. But in a spot like this where there's so much value in the game, it's the highest scoring game on the slate, I think you said, and it just looks like there's a ton to choose from here. So I think it makes a lot of sense to consider a game stack here. You mentioned that Montreal 3 line. They're coming in under 10K for the entire line. So, I mean, you can do a lot just by stacking, starting with that line and then building up to different spots. But if you wanted to build, with them and then Vancouver 1, you're still not talking about a massive investment of money. And then you can go and pay up for, some of your one-off spots, your goaltender. So I think it makes a lot of sense to start looking around here and, just see how these different lines click together on the different sites.
Yeah, and you've got Allen, who's as hot and cold as any goalie. He has stretches where he's really good. He has stretches where he's legitimately like one of the worst goalies in the NHL. Who knows which Jake Allen you'll see tonight? But that makes me even want Vancouver more back to back for these teams. I just love everything about this game. I usually don't game stack or I try to avoid game stacking in a lot of my lineups. But the game stacks that I do have, I think a lot of them are going to come from Montreal and Vancouver. But for the key here is going to be, all right, whichever top lines going underweight on, whether it's Winnipeg 1 or someone else. I think I'm set on playing a ton of the Islanders top line, but wherever I go, I just need that game to stay a little bit quiet so this Montreal game can take me to the promised land.
There you go.
Is this right?
Is that a spot where, from a construction point of view, is that a spot where you might consider, instead of grabbing the full stack of a line, maybe I grab 2 guys from each side in the Montreal-Vancouver game and then go to a 2-man from Colorado, from one of these other big teams, instead of paying up for the entire and try and kind of bullseye a swath of 2-man groups from those different lines to try and get a little bit of the game stack, but also spend that salary on something expensive. Because once you put too much of the game stack from a game with a lot of value, then you're not really spending your money efficiently elsewhere.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you want to go like McKinnon, Rantanen or something, and then do a 2-2 from one side of each of this game or something like that. I could see that. Sure. I mean, we've seen like 2-2s win a couple times these big tournaments. You got to hit the nuts, but I mean, you got to hit the nuts anyways. So it's not that crazy to do that with your forwards, and especially if you can correlate one or both of your defensemen after that. I think you can be in a really good spot if you do that correctly. Always leave the goal scorer off when I do that. Yes, that's the problem. Yeah. So you leave off Tom Wilson, he scores 2 goals. Yeah, that kind of thing happens.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Colorado and the LA Kings. Last game of the night, and we are perfectly on time, Terry. 3.2 implied total for the Abs, 2.3 for the Kings. And on time, I mean, we've got the deeper dive coming on after this. Adam and Lofty are going to break it down for you, this NBA slate. So make sure to tune into that if you're playing some NBA DFS. And then live before lock after that. We've also got a late slate live before lock. Terry, did you get to catch any of that show? I heard it was a success.
I heard it was really good. I'm looking forward to tuning in tonight. I was a little tied up last night, but that's awesome. Nobody else out there is doing a late slate live before lock show. That's great. What a good idea. Psyched to see it.
Yeah, you guys get to hang out. You guys get to hang out with us all day. We got MMA, we got PGA, NFL still going on, NHL, NBA late slate. We'll probably at some point have a slate for the Turbo 2-game, MLB slate in the afternoon on a Wednesday at some point. Tyler's shaking his head no. The producer, Tyler, he's saying no. He wants to get some sleep, but I don't know, Tyler. Maybe we're just going to have to hire.
I was up for like 3 a.m. live before locks for KBO over pandemic time and everything. So whatever, man. Let's get this thing 24 hours. One channel, always on. You tune in whenever you want. Make this the new ESPN.
That's right. I love it. All right, back to Colorado and the LA Kings. Talk about Colorado 1. You're relying heavily on the tools on the site. And if you look at the top stacks tool, you are going to say that there is not enough Colorado 1 in the world tonight. You're just jamming as much as possible, right?
Bingo. Yeah, I mean, based exclusively on that, that's obviously where you're going to go. It just becomes an exercise in how am I spending my money? Where else am I getting people to put into my roster? And am I taking too much of a hit from a value perspective and from an upside perspective by doing that? So at 23-1 on DK, 23-5 on FanDuel, it's a tough line to roster, but man, they look fantastic.
Yeah, they're like not even that fun to talk about, like because they're always getting owned. Top Stack Tool always loves them because they're always one of the highest raw point projecting teams. It's just a matter of can you find, 2-man and a one-off that's reasonable? Can you avoid duplication with this kind of stack? And they're not outrageously owned tonight. Like McKinnon, probably going to be over 20%. We're projecting his line mates Landeskog and Rantanen in the teens, and even if they're a little bit higher than that, I don't think it changes too much. Once you do a certain point in ownership on a 6-game slate, like you kind of know what you can do with the rest of your lineup to avoid being duped. So they're going to get matched up against Kopitar, Iafallo, and Adrian Kempe. Is this right? I didn't see that Dustin Brown moved down, but doesn't do a whole lot for me either way. I'm not looking at the Kings side too much. I like the second line a little bit. Right now on Colorado, the problem with them is just I can't build enough lineups that I'm really comfortable with if I'm full stacking. So this might be a spot where maybe you just go Colorado onslaught and power play stack them, throw in Kadri, throw in Cale Makar, and whichever 2-man third line stacks you can get, you just mix and match those a few different ways. I think I will have some full Colorado power play stacks going up against Jonathan Quick here. These two teams played the other night. Kopitar line did a decent job of holding Colorado 1 to limited chances, but I don't know. I don't see them doing that all too often. I mean, it's really, really hard to limit this line. If I'm going to another line on Colorado, it would be the second line. Kadri Saad and Jonas Donskoy. You're just getting low ownership on a guy like Donskoy at 3,300. He can score some goals when he's got decent line mates. You saw him do it with the Sharks a couple years ago. Had some moments last year, but was playing on the third line a lot of last year. So getting a shot on this second line, I don't mind Colorado 2. And did I mention LA 2? I think they're fine as a filler stack, but Carter's 5,700, so a little bit expensive for the whole line. Anything else you got here?
You mentioned Makar. He jumps off the page for me as a defenseman. I don't think he's getting owned enough, even though he's over 10%, but not by much. I think the price is right. He has a tremendous amount of production correlation with that top line, so really like him as a blue liner coming in. Doughty on the other side of things, if you were looking to the LA power play, is not extremely expensive. I guess he's around his normal pricing. So for him, not getting a ton of ownership, if you wanted to, pop him in as either a one-off or for some correlation with that LA 1 line, if you were playing LA 1, I think that makes some sense too. There was another thing I was going to say there, but I lost it. Oh, the ownership on that Avs 2 line looks pretty good on both sides. So I think it makes some sense to look there. Like you said, if you were looking for alternate production from a team that generates 6.67 high danger chances so far this year and converts on 64.5% of them so far this year.
Last thing I'm going to mention, then we'll get out of here. Bowen Byram is expected to make his NHL debut. I don't know much about him. Talking to smarter people, it sounds like this guy's going to be very good. So, he's going to be 2,500 tonight, probably the cheapest price you're going to get if he plays any sort of decent minutes. That might be another guy to punt with in addition to Heinola. So that's all we got for you today. We got to get out for the NBA show. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks to Terry for joining me. Great first show. Audience loves you already. YouTube chat being very nice. Good luck tonight, everybody. And Josh and I will catch you back tomorrow.